Welcome back, everybody, to whatever we're going to call this. We swear we'll have a name for it eventually. It's harder than you think, so we're working on that.
We interrupt this program with some breaking news. The podcast that currently has no name officially now has a name. It is called the Scribes Podcast, the Scribes, Scribes Podcast. Now, viewers at home don't need to worry, filled with anxiety, wondering, what is this wonderful show called? I love it so much, but how do I recommend it to people? What do I call it? Well, dear viewer, you now need to worry not. This is called the Scribes Podcast. Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
The funny thing is, though, is like, by the time this is uploaded, we'll already have a name.
That's true.
And we'll already be, like, this is, what, main episode 3?
Yeah.
And we still have...
The audience knows the name of it before we do. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, wow, that's... Talk about... You know, that's almost just as mysterious about what we're going to talk about.
It is. You know, the topic of today is very mysterious, Tommy. It's the book that they left out of the Bible. You know, those guys at the Council of Nicaea, when they were putting all those books together, deciding what goes into the Bible, they left this one out, and they're trying to keep the secrets of the universe from us that the reptilian overlords don't want us to know, Tommy.
Exactly. This is what the council doesn't want you to know.
Exactly. It's in the Vatican archives, everybody. The lizard people who run the country or the world or whatever it is with their space lasers, they don't want you to know about this book that you can find for free online and read about. It's secret information.
It's so secret that you can find web pages kind of mediocrely designed, or just walls of text from, I think it's the Wordsworth, or who did the OT pseudepigrapha? Who did that?
Charlesworth.
Charlesworth, yeah.
Yeah, or even worse, the R.H. Charles version, which is a great version, but it was like made in 1902, so it's like kind of outdated linguistically. But you know, that lends credence because old books are always right, Tom.
Exactly. Just like this book we're about to cover.
Well, old and young at the same time. If nobody's guessed what we're talking about so far,
it's because they didn't read the title of the video.
It's because they didn't read the title of the video, which again, I still don't know what that's going to be. So we are talking today about the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch is, I feel like it's kind of, for a lost book, it's pretty well known, I would say. A lot of people know what it is, or at least they kind of have a general idea of the contents of it. And I've come across it a lot as like the book that was left out of the Bible. Have you seen that a lot, Tommy?
I haven't seen a lot of people be like, oh, this was left out of the Bible. It's just kind of like, what the heck is this? And then maybe some people who are a little more well-informed would be like, how come Jude quotes this?
Yeah, no, that's definitely, I feel like that's a good point. There's 3 categories of people. There's the people who know about it and have conspiracies about it. There's people who kind of know about it and are like, I don't know anything about it. And there's people who are like, kind of weird that something in the Bible itself quotes something outside of the Bible, which is actually a lot more common than people think, and we'll talk about that eventually. But yeah. So, well, I guess we should just kind of launch right into it. Like, we have a lot of interesting information here to cover. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Book of Enoch is an ancient, I would say, Israelite Jewish document from antiquity. It claims to be written by a guy named Enoch, who is the great-grandfather of Noah, whom you might know from the story of Noah's flood. And so the Book of Enoch presents itself as being written by this figure, and throughout, over 2,000 years, various groups of people have seen it as a source of esoteric secrets, the mysteries of the universe, and other assorted interesting things to talk about, I suppose. Sorry to burst anyone's bubble out there, but I'm afraid to inform you that the Book of Enoch, you know, it isn't ancient, it isn't holy, it was man-made. It is ancient.
I can't be Christian anymore, guys. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have to be. I guess I'm going to be best friends with Alex O'Connor now. I have to be.
Tommy, the other cosmic skeptic. I mean, you are doubting Thomas the Apostle, as we see.
Yeah, that's right.
Thomas in scare quotes and not doubting. Like, your first name is Doubting the Apostle, and you're known colloquially as Thomas.
Yes.
For our audio listeners, Tommy has totally destroyed his name in the in the recording here. He has doubting Thomas the Apostle, but he put
I-
Thomas in scare quotes.
I thought about that earlier this morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. I need to put Thomas in air quote or the.
I was hoping it was intentional, because if not, it just shows how tired both of us are.
Yeah, no, that was 100% intentional.
This is what I have to work with, dear people. This is my business partner. This is wonderful. Jeez. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Book of Enoch today. We're going to talk about the story of the Book of Enoch. We're going to talk about where the Book of Enoch comes from, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the Book of Enoch came together. This is going to be part 1 of 2. There's a lot to talk about here, partially because the Book of Enoch is 104 chapters long, and partially because for those of us who are Christians, it kind of matters that parts of our scriptures and New Testament quote from this book. So we should spend some time breaking that down. So this is part 1.
Yeah.
And part 1 is primarily dedicated to talking about the Watcher story, which is what I think most people know from the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, so the Book of the Watchers, and so taking another step back, I know we don't want to complicate this any more than is necessary.
Oh, I'm gonna.
Okay, well, Mr. Sam Yaza will hear, as I probably horribly, for those listening audio only, Brenner changed it to Sam Yaza.
My first name is Sam, my last name is Yaza.
Yeah. His spacebar doesn't work.
Yeah, no. I'm running on DOS.
Yeah.
It was revealed to me by the Watchers that DOS is the best.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why they were punished too.
Exactly. They introduced DOS.
So anyway, the Book of Enoch is really kind of a collection of these there's the most common, what most people probably know, is the Book of the Watchers, which is like chapters 1 through 36. And then there's like the parables or similitudes is another name. And then, gosh, what? There's
Dream Visions, the astronomical book, or the luminaries, and then the Epistle of Enoch, and then the conclusion book, which may have been originally separate. And there may also be a Book of Noah in there too. So we're talking like 5 or 6 originally separate books that were all combined together, which coming straight off the Pentateuch episode, this should be like, common knowledge to everybody. Although I appreciate that the people who put the Book of Enoch together had the, consideration of saying, instead of like, intersplicing all these together, let's just put one after the other so you can kind of tell when one chunk ends and another one begins. I appreciate that personally.
Yeah, and then what's also interesting too, is so like we have fragments of the, like, it wasn't just like some dudes in the desert and well, kind of.
I mean,
Brennan knows where I'm going with this, but we found fragments of various parts of Enoch at the Qumran community, the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have some, so at the very least, the scholarly term Enochic literature, it was at least important to the kind of Second Temple Judaism and kind of, proto kind of. Well, hold on. Never mind. We call Second Temple starting with Ezra and Nehemiah. So never mind.
Starting with the Second Temple, yes, Tommy.
Yes. Guys, did you know the Second Temple period started when the Second Temple was built?
Wonderful.
Checkmate, atheists.
Yeah, it was super important. I mean, like it was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It probably wasn't written by the people who put those together. We have to have a whole Dead Sea Scrolls episode at some point. That's going to take a long time. But it shows up being referenced and quoted by a lot of different literature back then. Mostly apocalyptic literature, which is kind of looking more at a theological or eschatological view of the world. You see it show up in some early Christian literature too. I feel like that's kind of a topic for episode 2 here as well. But it was a very well-known document in antiquity. Before we go any further, too, I kind of want to comment on what we mean by the Book of Enoch, because as I'm sure Tommy knows, there's a couple books of Enoch. And I mean that in 2 ways, because, if you try to find the Book of Enoch today, like online or in a bookstore or in a collection of Old Testament Apocrypha, you'll probably come across a document called First Enoch, and that's what we're talking about today here. There's also something called Second Enoch and something called Third Enoch, and those are sort of spiritual successors to First Enoch, but they were written substantially later. So Second Enoch usually gets dated to around the 3rd century AD, so about 300 years after Christ or 250 years or so. And Third Enoch is typically placed like well into the rabbinic period, so we're talking like 3, 4, 500 AD. So kind of getting along into antiquity, kind of late antiquity, early medieval period is when that pops up. So what we're talking about today is First Enoch. The book of Enoch is typically referred to as First Enoch and vice versa. So if you see something called First Enoch or the book of Enoch, it's probably the same document. And like Tommy said, so First Enoch is comprised of several originally independent documents. These are, as we mentioned, the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Book of Dream Visions, the Book of the Luminaries, possibly another book just called the Concluding Book, a book called the Epistle of Enoch, and again, possibly another one called the Book of Noah. The two of those are possibilities. The rest of them we're pretty confident about. And so these would have been written by different people at different times in different places in response to different situations. But all of them center around the person figure of Enoch. And so at some point, probably around the 4th century AD, somebody took all of these disparate books about Enoch and put them all together into one document that we call the Book of Enoch. Anything to add there, Tommy?
Yeah, and it's kind of, I want to touch on the point you said they're written for certain like the reasons.
Yeah.
Kind of the fancy scholarly word or phrase Sitzenleben means like situation in life, which is typical. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think typically Sitzenleben is referring to the situation that the author finds himself in life. Because although I think you probably could talk about a literary Sitzenleben, but that's a topic for something else. But anyway, so the kind of setting in life or situation in life, this kind of goes into just what apocalyptic literature typically is and how it functions, because this is important. It's typically apocalyptic literature is responding to typically some sort of crisis going on. The author is looking at his situation in the world, and also apocalyptic is typically Jewish, Judeo-Christian, you know.
There's some kind of like semi or quasi-apocalyptic literature from like Egyptian and Babylonian perspectives, but it never quite gets like,
it's not.
There's something quintessentially Jewish about apocalyptic literature.
Yeah, and so they're kind of looking at the world, their world, and being like, well, something's wrong. Like, Revelation is probably one of the easiest examples I can use for understanding that, because you have, man, Revelation, that's a whole other.
We're not talking Revelation here, Tommy. Use it for your reference and move on, man. We're not opening up
but basically, like Revelation, the kind of Sitzenleben, the crisis that is being responded to, is this kind of severe oppression of the church and kind of corruption within the church, people following these heterodox theologies and whatnot. And so it's a response, and those responses also usually entail some sort of kind of pulling back of the heavenly veil. It's like they're saying, God, why is all these horrible things happening? What's with that? And then it's kind of the cosmic veil is open, and it's kind of like, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. You can chill. Don't want the righteous, there's a reason why you should be righteous and follow my law, follow my Torah. It's because it's good for you and it's good for my design for you. Yeah, things suck, but the wicked will be judged. Don't worry. They keep, continue to be righteous. And like there's a reason this is happening. The wicked will lose in the end. And that's kind of the typical kind of thing. It's a response kind of it's a response to crisis. And it's usually saying, hey, all ye who are suffering, it's not in vain. Yeah, things suck right now, but in the end, God will judge the wicked and he'll exalt the righteous. So be righteous. It's kind of it.
And the emphasis on judgment you brought up there too is super important because like that's kind of apocalyptic is the air of the prophetic literature in the Old Testament. It's like the prophetic literature, but for a new generation. Because what's interesting is when the Old Testament canon closes, kind of like after the exile, prophetic literature kind of stops. You can argue it kind of moves forward, but apocalyptic literature starts. There really isn't a lot of apocalyptic literature in the Old Testament. It's kind of more of a second temple phenomenon. And so it's kind of the apocalyptic literature is the inheritor of what the prophetic literature tried to do. Although normally, and I think you alluded to this too, it's a more like universal scale because the prophetic literature talking about, doom is coming, is kind of talking about the nation of Israel or the nation of Israel and Judah and the divided monarchy. And the apocalyptic literature really is concerned a lot of times with the whole world. It has this more universalist scope. Not all the time. A lot of times it is still centralized. Like Enoch, especially, is very universal in scope. Whereas if you read something like Fourth Ezra or Second Baruch, those are other apocalypses, also responding to crises. To Tommy's point, responding to the destruction of the Second Temple. Those are almost exclusively focused on Israel and what's going to happen to them and to the nation of Judea. So. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the fact that like this is an apocalyptic document. It isn't solely concerned with like the judgment of humankind, but it definitely plays a part in it. And it's kind of a major theological, what would you call it, like current kind of undergirding everything here. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the kind of there is very much a judgment part in the Book of the Watchers, and we'll get to it when we kind of go through it. But it's not just humans.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
My friend.
And there's crazy crystal houses.
Yeah, I always knew crystals were important, Tommy. Every time you go to the New Age shops, they've been telling us for a long time. We didn't believe them, but there they are.
Who knew the crystal girls on dating apps were right?
We knew it was all going somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, before we kind of,
your sanity, don't do it.
I feel like before we start talking about kind of what's going on in the Book of Watchers, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of just a little comment on the manuscript history of First Enoch or the Book of Enoch. I won't go too deep, but just because I think it's important. So the Book of Enoch, by which I mean that First Enoch, that collection of Enochic literature, is considered to be part of the Bible by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And so it's really thanks to them that we still have it intact, because we don't have a complete manuscript of the whole contents of the Book of Enoch in the original languages. So most of it was probably written in either Hebrew or Aramaic, depending on which book we're talking about here. And we have some manuscripts of those, as Tommy alluded to, from among the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have quite a few Greek translations of it as well, or fragments of them. We have one of the reasons we know that these were originally separate books is we have one manuscript of the whole Book of the Watchers preserved alongside some other documents in Papyrus 72, which was buried with a Christian monk in Akhmim. So that's interesting. And so basically what probably happened was you had these original Hebrew and Aramaic manuscripts. They were translated into Greek, and those Greek manuscripts were probably taken to Ethiopia and were a part of the canon of the Ethiopian church at that point, so around the 4th century.
Yeah.
So if you look into this, you'll find a lot about the Ethiopian manuscripts, and a lot of people think it was written in Ethiopian. It's preserved in Ethiopian, but the originals were probably Hebrew and Aramaic, which are likewise Semitic languages. Well, should we talk about the Book of Watchers a little bit?
Oh yeah, let's go in.
Perfect. Well, having discussed some information on manuscripts, let's talk a little bit about the Book of Watchers itself. So again, when we're talking about the Book of Watchers, we're talking about the first section of First Enoch. Remember, it's that collection of 5 or 6 different books. We're talking about that first part. It's the first 36 chapters. And this is probably the part of, if you're familiar with First Enoch at all, this is probably the part of the Book of Enoch that you're familiar with. Because this is, if you can't tell by the title, the story about the Watchers and the related things. So just to kind of give the architecture of this book, the Book of the Watchers consists of sort of 4.
sorry,
go ahead.
before you go, Brenner, what the heck are Watchers?
What are Watchers, Tommy? Why, that's a great question. Leading into our sponsors, the Watchers. Do you ever feel like you're alone all the time? Well, don't be, because someone's always
They're
watching.
always watching.
You see that webcam on your computer? They're watching you through that. You see that camera on your phone? They're watching you through that. There's holes in your walls that you can't see, and they're watching you through those too.
Yeah, I'm currently outside, and they're watching.
Whenever you feel alone, just remember they're always watching. No, I'm kidding. Tommy, thank you for bringing that up because yeah, the Watchers are kind of a big deal in the book named after them, aren't they? Um, so in the Book of Watchers, and I would say in ancient Second Temple Jewish literature more broadly, though not universally, the Watchers are considered to be a class of angel. So there's this group of angels, and they seem to inhabit this space sort of between earth and heaven, and their function isn't exactly laid out clearly. I feel like the name probably betrays part of what's going on there. But they're sometimes represented as sort of being intermediaries for humankind, between humans and God. And we're going to get into that in the Book of Watchers itself here for a second. But when we're talking about Watchers, imagine, for all intents and purposes, angels for the time being. Thanks for that, Tommy. I appreciate
Yeah, and we'll get into who these specific Watchers are a little bit later.
Yes. My name is a foreshadowing of that. So just a quick rundown of the structure of the Book of Watchers. Like I said, it's 36 chapters long, so a pretty good chunk of First Enoch. By the way, First Enoch is 104 chapters long, so it's a big book. The chapters tend to be pretty short, but like it's a lot of
It's a chunker.
It is. It's substantially bigger than a lot of other apocalyptic books too, which tend to be pretty short.
Yeah, Book of Enoch is in fact thick with 2 C's.
I didn't say it. I'm never going to describe a book that way, but Tommy's just degenerate enough to do that. So, well, typical Anglican. So, as I have been trying to say for the past 10 minutes, the first 5 chapters of the Book of Enoch are actually a prophetic oracle. So remember we said a second ago that apocalyptic literature is sort of the inheritor of prophetic literature. A prophetic oracle starts off the whole Book of Enoch. It's 5 chapters long. And I won't bore you with all the details, but the primary thing this oracle is trying to get across is that, God's creation was designed with a particular order in mind. And most of his creation follows that order. The stars go through the same course of the night every single night. The sun always goes through the sky and goes down. These things know what they're doing, and they do them repeatedly. The trees put on their leaves at the right times. The trees lose their leaves at the right time. The Vikings try to go to the Super Bowl, and they fail to make it to the Super Bowl. These are all things that God intended, right?
Exactly.
But the oracle brings up the fact that human beings refuse to live within God's order. Human beings know there's a way they're supposed to live. They're supposed to be, for all intents and purposes, good. We'll talk about where Torah comes into play with this later. But humans are supposed to live according to the way God wants them to. They're supposed to be good, and yet they insist on doing ungodly and evil things with their free will. And it's basically a call to repentance saying, hey, knock it off, come back to doing what God expects of you. Otherwise, one day God is going to judge all humankind. And that's not going to be good for you if you insist on living a life of evil then. So that's kind of what the oracle is all about. Then we get into the fun stuff, the stuff people actually know Enoch for. So chapters 6 through 11 are the Watcher story. We're going to unpack that soon, but it's a story involving these Watchers, these angelic figures, and their interaction with humankind. And then it leads to the first descent of Enoch, which is chapters 12 through 20. And so this is where Enoch, the figure, is introduced for the first time. And he's taken up into heaven to meet God, in a dream, by the way. And then there's also a second ascent, which is chapters 21 through 36. And typically these two ascents of Enoch are divided. They flow really well together, but some scholars think that they're originally separate, so it's worth dividing it up. But basically the second half of the Book of Watchers, or the second 2/3, is all about Enoch's tours of heaven. Oh, we haven't talked about who Enoch is, Tommy.
We did a little bit earlier, but
I feel like we could just kind of give everybody a rundown of that real quick. Do you want to?
Yeah. So Enoch, so he is a person who shows up once in the Hebrew. Well, actually, there's two people named Enoch. Actually, the Enoch that we're referencing is in
Genesis 5.
Genesis 5.
Yeah, the genealogy there.
Oh yeah, because Noah's Ark starts in 6, I think.
Yeah.
So in part of this genealogy, and this is going through Seth's genealogy specifically, you get this guy, and it's like, in fact, let me pull it up. Actually, just
To
the
give
verse.
context to what Tommy's talking about, so the genealogy of Seth. Seth is Adam and Eve's third son after the first two, killed each other. Seth was the third son they had after that, and his lineage is counted down from Adam actually all the way down several generations onwards as a means of sort of spacing out the Adam and Eve story in this sort of primordial history and making sure like, okay, a long time has passed until this point. And Enoch appears in that list as the seventh from Adam. And it says that he lived 365 years, and then he was no more because God took him up or took him away. Does that sound right, Tommy?
Yeah, so I have it pulled up. So Enoch, so his dad's name was Jared. It's true. Yeah, so it's Genesis 5:20. Although, or altogether, or I guess if we go to verse 18, when Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, he lived longer. Blah blah blah. Genesis 5:21. It's when Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Blah blah blah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God for 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was not, because God took him. That's one of my favorite lines of the Hebrew Bible, just because it's like, and he was not, because God took him.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all the information that the canonical Hebrew Bible, the Bible you'll find in your churches and your synagogues, says about Enoch. And there was a story there at some point.
Yeah, and what's also interesting too is if I remember, so you have Enoch's son Methuselah that they mention. So in this whole genealogy, you have Methuselah lived the longest out of this genealogy, which is 969 years. And then you have Enoch, who lived the shortest span, which is 365. And also, I know that I think it's in the book of the astronomical book, which we're not talking about now. But there was a debate. Thank you, computer, for bringing up notifications. There was a debate on like what calendar to use, whether it's solar or a lunar solar calendar. We'll get into that later, but it's interesting that Enoch lived 365, which is a lunar, or which is a solar calendar thing. But
yeah. No, he was closely associated with the solar calendar, and that's going to come up actually here pretty soon because it's kind of important. So that's Enoch. So essentially what you need to know going into this is Enoch is depicted in the book of Enoch as being the descendant of Adam, the seventh generation after Adam. So this is old, right? Again, Adam and Eve, the first humans in the Hebrew Bible, 7 generations later is Enoch. So for the authors of the book of Enoch to put these words into the mouth of Enoch, to make it appear as if Enoch is speaking these things, is sort of an appeal to antiquity. And again, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode. Ancient people and modern people have this idea that if something is old, it's true and or authoritative. We sort of have this thought in the back of our mind for whatever reason. And so if you wanted to convey an idea, like if I wanted to convey an idea today, and like a great way of investing it with authority is to say, well, Methuselah wrote this book, putting my own ideas into it and conveying that across to people as if it was written by an ancient. Because again, the ancients were sort of seen as these repositories of true knowledge, especially Enoch. And that's a bit of an oversimplification of why people did that. Writing in somebody else's name is called pseudepigraphy. And that's one of the reasons people would do it, was to trick people into thinking someone more important than themselves wrote it. There were other reasons to write in somebody else's name because it happens a lot in the Second Temple period.
Yeah,
in the New Testament period.
I will say I don't think all pseudepigrapha was, and there's scholarly debate on whether it was used for deception
Mhm.
or if it was used as just a rhetorical device, and that the readers would have known, well, okay, Enoch didn't write this, but yeah, that's a whole other debate on the intentionality of pseudepigrapha and whether it was a rhetoric of deception or a rhetoric of appeal to antiquity. That's
Yeah,
just
and again, like I feel like putting all these pseudepigraphal writings in one basket is probably a bad idea too, because it's kind of like some of them were probably meant to be deceptive, but some of them observably weren't. So it's kind of like it's a complicated topic. But the people who wrote the Enoch books were definitely trying to appeal to this authority from this ancient time, right? Like one of the ancient fathers they're trying to appeal to his authority to convey this ancient knowledge that's been passed down through generations. So that's kind of some background information on who Enoch is. So I appreciate that, Tommy. I
yeah.
realize we skipped that. It's also worth noting too that some scholars have thought that not necessarily Enoch who's referenced in the Bible, but the character of Enoch that's put together in the book of Enoch itself. Because remember, he does appear in the Bible itself, but the people who wrote the book of Enoch were drawing from that and expanding it. And so they're making this character who probably has a historical basis, but they're building the character up. Some scholars think that in the book of First Enoch itself, the character of Enoch is partially based on Enoch from the Bible. He's also partially based on a old Mesopotamian figure named Enmedaranki. So Enmedaranki was a old, I believe, Sumerian king. He's listed on the Sumerian kings list as being the seventh one down, actually, I believe. And Enmedaranki was able to successfully ascend to the heavens and learn the secrets of the gods. So he learned how to read livers, so hepatomancy or extispicy. He learned mathematical calculations and how to read there's a ritual that would put oil in water and the forms would tell you messages from the gods in Mesopotamian culture. So he
Oh,
learned
I
that.
do that all the time.
Yeah, don't we all? I mean, me
Yeah.
personally, whenever my truck runs out of oil, I just I take the oil, I dump it in the fresh water supply nearest to my house, and then
And then
everything comes from the gods.
yeah, and then they say, "Bro, take it to a mechanic, please." The machine spirit says, "Bro, take me to a mechanic, please."
So this figure in Medaronki might be behind the way that the authors of First Enoch portray Enoch, at least in the earliest material. And this connection actually, modern scholars weren't the first ones to notice this. There was an ancient Christian from the 6th century, an Nestorian Christian named Cosmas, I'm going to mispronounce this, Indicopeuste, and he traveled to Babylon and he heard about this Medaronki guy. And he was like, oh, they're talking about Enoch. That's kind of cool. So that's pretty cool. If anybody wants to look that up, it's in his book, Topographia Christiana, 12.3. Again, this is from the 500s AD. So whoever wrote the books of Enoch may have been aware of Medaronki and were drawing on him to sort of make this mystical figure connection a little bit more explicit anyways. So yeah, I think that's enough about Enoch. Let's launch into the Book of Watchers, Tommy.
Oh yeah.
So to summarize the story of the Book of Watchers, which we went over a little bit here, basically it starts with a scene in heaven. You're looking at the assembly of the Watchers, these angelic figures who are watching humankind, and they realize, hey, those human women look pretty good. And we want to have wives and families for ourselves and have children. But there's a little bit of an issue because the leader of the Watchers, an angel by the name of Samyaza, no relation, says, I'm a little bit nervous because we all want to go down there and do this, even though it's forbidden to us. I'm afraid I'm going to leave you guys down there, and the rest of you are going to get cold feet and go back up. And so all the Watchers bind themselves with an oath saying, no, we're going to do this. We're going to bear the consequences of it together. So
Yeah.
real bro
We're
moment.
we're gonna rizz them up, and we're gonna do it, guys. Trust us.
This is how 20 guys in their 20s prepare to go to bars to talk to girls, which
Yeah.
I don't do because
The ancients did it first.
the Watchers did it first, man. We're following the rites of the ancients, dang it. So the Watchers do descend to Earth, and again, they take human women to be their wives, and they have children with them. Don't think too hard about how like spirits can have kids. That's a whole question for another day. It's also a question of how the Israelites saw spirits and how they perceived that. But for the sake of the story, they were able to have children with
Yeah,
humans.
and this part is really kind of a retelling of what happens in Genesis 6.
Yeah, I feel like interpretation would be maybe a more interesting way of putting it, because it's kind of like, so again, not to go
Okay.
back, not
Yeah,
to
'cause
talk about the Bible too much, but Genesis 6 begins with the fact that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and they had children with them. And that's just kind of where it leaves it. It doesn't go into that further. It doesn't say who these sons of God are.
yeah.
So Tommy and I might have different opinions on this one. Some believe that this is talking about angelic figures coming down and having children with humans, and that the Book of Enoch was aware of this and kind of built on that. I favor the interpretation that the sons of God in that passage are the old kings of Mesopotamia, who did consider themselves to be the direct descendants of the gods. And you have episodes like Gilgamesh, where he just kind of takes anyone he wants to be his wife and have a lot of kids because of that, but without getting too graphic. So that'd
This
be
is
more
a family show, dang it.
We're talking about fallen angels, man. Come on, how family can this be?
It's in the Bible, so, you know.
There's a lot of stuff in the Bible.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so the root of this story, like where they're getting this idea from of these cosmic figures coming down and having children with humans, is they were looking at Genesis 6 and building on that idea and kind of putting a story behind it. There are some scholars who think that the Enoch story is older than the Genesis story. I doubt that. Nobody in the Academy really holds that anymore, but it is a theory that we have to throw out there. Anything else you want to say about Genesis 6, Tommy?
Yeah, and this kind of progresses in the story of the Watchers. So I'll kind of do a thing in tandem. So we have in the rest of the Genesis 6 passage. So the sons of God, whoever they are, angelic beings or kings, whatever. For the sake of the story, I think they're even in Genesis. I think they're referring to angelic beings, but so they certainly are in the Book of the Watchers. So they go down. They don't actually riz up the
The ladies.
human women. They just take them. Um, so definitely plus L. Like that's a pretty L move. I think
Yeah,
we all can agree. Pretty lame. Don't do that. So they go and they take and they procreate, and then they create the Nephilim. Those weird figures. Whoa, who the heck
those
who are
guys.
they? We'll probably have a video on that later. Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
I forgot that the Nephilim are actually mentioned in the Genesis 6 part. I appreciate you bringing that up because they show up in the Book of
yes,
Watchers too.
yes.
That's
Oh,
right.
and it's so interesting how the Watchers talk about like later, because this is an idea that one of our other friends told me about, and Michael Heiser picks this up in Unseen Realm. So basically, so they go and that's just kind of what Genesis 6 talks about is though they create the Nephilim, those great giant warriors of old. They call them giants for I don't really know why, to be honest. Hello all. This is just a quick note from your friendly neighborhood editor. So you just heard me say, hey, I don't know why the Nephilim are also called giants. I don't know where that comes from. What the heck's with that? And, at the time of recording, it was true. I had no idea. Since then, I've done far more research into this area, and I just wanted to share very briefly where that comes from. I'm not going to do... So it's a very brief textual history, and by brief, I'm just looking at major translations. So let's dive in. I'm here at parabible.com. I have Genesis 6 loaded up. On the left-hand side, we have... oh, by the way, Parabible is a great free resource. On the left, we have the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew text. We have, in the middle, the Septuagint translation. It's the Old Greek translation of the Torah, or Pentateuch. And then, just for funsies, we have the Net Bible, which is the New English translation. So Genesis 6, 4 begins with Ha Nephilim. Ha is the definite article, which just means the. It's the. And so it's the Nephilim. The Net Bible translates it, or really it transliterates Nephilim. Transliteration is just he's using English letters to spell the Hebrew word. So it's a transliteration. But the Greek reads hoi de gigantes. So hoi gigantes is how the translator is translating Nephilim. It's actually translating it, so it's a different word that they're using. De is just, it means and it, because of Greek grammar, it comes between. That's the reason why it's coming between the definite article, the, and the actual noun, gigantes. So yeah. So Nephilim to gigantes in the Greek. And then if we go to Jerome's Vulgate, we have gigantes. Pretty much, I don't know if it's exactly a transliteration or a translation. My Latin is not as good as my Greek, but regardless, gigantes. Then we go to the King James translation, and we have giants. So Nephilim, gigantes, giants. That's very briefly where that comes from. Hope that clears things up at least a little more. And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
I don't think I call giants in Genesis, but in the book of Enoch, they are referred to as giants.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's weird though. Later in the I think it's in Numbers.
Yeah, the descendants of the Nephilim are mentioned as being.
Yeah. Oh no, there's giants in the land, and it's just like, where the heck did that come from?
Gidolim, they're the big ones.
Yeah, the big boys.
Large men. They could have just been super fat. We don't know.
Or they could have been swole.
Tall, fat, swole. The world will never know. It would just be really funny if they were just like these. It's like, they're all a little overweight. We'll call them the giants. It's like, oh man,
they're just like a
little injury right there. That feels really bad.
Yeah, it's like hey man, they're just husky. Come on now.
I feel like they would probably be perceived as less of a threat that way than if they were actually 9 feet tall and had clubs and stuff like that. But
so then that's the descendants of them, and then they're kind of mentioned here and there throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible, very, very sparingly, or might not even be the rest of the Hebrew. I think it's just like when the flood happens, they're supposedly dead, but then in Numbers, the spies go into the land, and then they come back and like, oh no, the giants.
They said it just like that too.
Oh yeah, exactly like that. I was there actually. That's how I quoted that. But then you get in the Book of the Watchers, they say, yeah, they created the kind of Nephilim, and then in the Watchers, does it go the Sons of God Watchers plus human gets Nephilim, and the Nephilim and their descendants are the giants?
So I don't think the Book of Watchers ever uses the term Nephilim. I think it just says that the offspring of the Watchers and humans were giants. So
okay.
That was the result of the Watchers coming down and marrying humans, is producing giant offspring.
Yeah.
And again, this is all, I don't want to tangle up the Genesis and the Enoch too much, because what we're saying here basically is that in the Bible itself, in the Christian and Jewish Bible, in Genesis, you get these little fragments that are kind of like, you feel like there's more there. And the people who wrote the Bible knew about this. And those sort of serve as the launch pads for the people who wrote the Book of Enoch. They're like, oh, we really like that stuff. Let's build on this and add more tradition to it. So in Genesis 6, the sons of God and the daughters of men, what does that mean? There's a couple interpretations. One of them is divine beings in humans. And in the Nephilim, what are those? Well, one of the interpretations is giants. And then there are giants in Numbers. So it's kind of like the people who wrote Enoch were familiar with these things, and they're kind of building on these ideas. So again, this isn't to say that this whole story is like somehow integral to the Christian or Jewish faith. This is sort of advanced fan fiction based on the biblical tradition. Doesn't mean it's useless. Doesn't mean it's dangerous necessarily. But I don't want to confuse the two strands, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's good.
yeah. So giants are a thing now.
Yeah. Here be giants.
What happens then, Tommy? Is God particularly happy about this whole situation?
So, spoiler alert, he's not happy about that.
Oh no! Before we get to that, we got to
Oh.
talk about the gifts of the angels, because it's not
Yes,
like
yeah.
the angels come down, the watchers come down, they're like, "Hey, I'm your handsome angelic husband. Want to have giant kids?" And women are like, "Cool."
They brought a little more to the table.
A little bit more, because the watchers, again, these are cosmic beings. Tommy alluded to this earlier in apocalyptic literature. It's this idea of sort of pulling back the curtains, stepping out from the matrix. You're seeing how things are working behind the scenes, really. That behind the scenes place, that's where the watchers are from. That's where they live. So they know the logic of the cosmos. They know how it works, at least in the minds of Second Temple Jewish writers. And so when the watchers come down, they share secrets with humankind that they weren't supposed to know. So they teach them magic is kind of the big one. They teach them, reading extispicy, reading livers, I believe, is one of the things they teach them. They teach them their astrology and astronomy. They teach them how to make makeup. Funny enough, it's probably the source of First Peter's polemic against makeup. So, ladies, it's not intrinsically evil to have makeup on. It's complicated. Maybe we can talk about that.
It's complicated, but it is intrinsically evil. No, I'm just kidding.
The implication is that the Watchers taught people how to use makeup to make themselves look more beautiful, so that they could seduce people out of their families. So it's kind of levers in an evil way. And most importantly, I think you have kind of two sections about the gifts of the Watchers. One is like magic and root cutting and makeup on the one side, and the other side, the other big one is warfare.
Yeah.
The Watchers teach humankind how to make swords and axes and armor and shields, specifically by an angel named Azazel.
Yep. Yeah, and that's in First Enoch chapter 8, in case you're curious.
Yeah. So there's sort of we'll talk about this more later, but the big two Watcher figures are Semyaza and Azazel. And again, we'll talk more why they're important later. I'm not even sure if Tommy knows about this, because there's some cool stuff going on behind the scenes here. So anyways, to recap where we've gone so far, Watchers come down, marry humans, have offspring who are giants. Those giants, by the way, eat a lot. So they're eating more than humans are capable of producing for them, and so they start eating people too, and then they start eating each other because they're hungry. They're some hungry boys. Tommy, does God like all this going on here? Is he like cool and just goes on with his day?
Yeah. Spoiler alert: he's not. He's God's just like, bruh, y'all are kind of screwing everything up, because just kind of like in the very beginning of the Book of the Watchers, you have this kind of talk of God's world and it's being ordered properly. A very, very common and very important concept. And oh gosh, I guess I'm being ascended into heaven now.
You're smoking, Tommy. You deserve it.
Oh, thanks. This very common and very important concept is order versus disorder, and also or chaos. I think Dr. John Walton has a book called Ancient Near Eastern Thought in the Old Testament,
which everyone should read, by the way. Like, seriously, if you're going to pick up one book that we recommend, we're going to recommend you a lot of books. If you're going to read one of them, I think, read Ancient Near Eastern Thought in the Old Testament by John Walton. You can get it for like $8 on Amazon. Like, just buy yourself a used copy, man. It's worth having in your life.
Oh, it is. It's so good. So good. But yeah,
you're being watched, Tommy.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for watching me, bro. I'm glad someone the watchers, and they're chirping at me. They're saying, don't explain the esoteric knowledge. Maybe that's why this bright light, they're getting ready to take me.
It couldn't be the sun. It has to be the sun, the chipmunks. No, man. Aliens and demons and spirits. That's what's going on.
Yeah, they're like, how dare you explain order and disorder? But yeah, so order and disorder. So you have the beginning saying, God's ordered world. The stars are on their tracks. The sun revolves. It's on its track. Everything's where it ought to be. It's where God said, all right, this is how it should be. It's great. And then every even creature has its own function, and this is what it's going to do. Well, the Watchers, the fallen ones, they come down and they screw up the order, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so now you have these giants who are hungry hippos, and now they're eating people, and so chaos. It's just chaos. And so God's just like, oh my gosh, this is not cash money. Hey, which angel does he go to specifically?
Interestingly, it's the angels who notice this, and they go to God and they say, "Can we do something about this, please?" And so the big three are Gabriel, Uriel, and Michael, but Raphael shows up later too. So,
yes, yeah, and this is in fact in chapter 9. I have the text pulled up. Yeah.
So the angels go to God and they're saying, as per Tommy's words, which is quoted directly from the original Hebrew, this was not very cash money of them.
Exactly.
And they're saying, like, God, please execute judgment upon these wicked ones. Where have we heard that before? And God responds by saying, okay. And what's interesting, too, is that God sort of does two different things. He says, Raphael, go and bind Azazel hand and foot and throw him into the abyss. And remember, Azazel is the one that taught them, humankind, how to make weapons. He's mentioned specifically.
Yeah, he's not in compliance with the heavenly ATF.
Meanwhile, Michael, actually Gabriel asks God to send Michael to take care of the rest of the Watchers. So Semyaza and his crew are likewise thrown into the abyss. They're mentioned separately. It's worth mentioning too, Raphael, that angel who cast Azazel into the abyss, he comes up as a main character in a different book, the book of Tobit, which is not in the Protestant Bible, but it is in the Catholic Bible. I'll have to talk about that sometime too. But in that book, Raphael is also responsible for taking care of a rogue demon on earth by the name of, the Hebrew in the Talmud, it's Asmodeus. So this Raphael figure is really, he's an apatropion. He's an anti-demon figure who shows up in a lot of Jewish literature. So it's kind of cool that he gets sick of, he's the attack dog on Azazel specifically. So Raphael takes Azazel to the abyss, Michael takes Semyaza and the rest of the Watchers to the abyss, and they're just kind of not having a good time there. And then we get the introduction of a very important figure. Who could it be, Tommy?
It might be the guy who wrote this book.
It might, supposedly wrote this book. It is Enoch. Uncle Enoch finally shows up 12 chapters into the book named after him, by the way.
Yeah. Fashionably late.
I don't think the text ever mentions how exactly this happens, but Enoch is just praying and he hears the Watchers calling out to him, and they ask him to talk to God on their behalf and say, "Hey, can we come out of here?" Because they're all trapped in basically hell, and they ask Enoch somehow,
"Can
you talk to God for us so we can leave this place?"
Yeah, it's funny. In chapter 12, it says, "Before these things, all of that, Enoch was hidden, and none of the children of men knew where he was hidden, and there he abode, and what had become of him." Oh, and where? So everyone's just like, "Bro, where'd Enoch go?" He's kind of
I'm talking to demons. And calm down.
Yeah, and his activities had to do with the Watchers, and his days were with the Holy Ones. Whoa! And then it goes into first person.
Yeah. So Enoch, he hears the complaint of the Watchers, and they ask him specifically. I think Azazel asks him, "Hey, we're trapped here. We've been contained. Can you please ask God to let us out? Because we're angels. We don't want to be down here anymore." And so Enoch, he actually has pity on them apparently, because he prays for the Watchers, and then he falls and has a little bit of a nice nap. He was very eepy after all that praying. And so in his dream, Enoch is taken up to heaven. He feels the rush of wind around him, and he's taken up into heaven, where he sees a cool house, basically. Is it How is it described, Tommy? You have the text in front of you. Don't read the whole thing, but like, give me the highlights.
Yeah, no, and I very distinctly remember this. It was cool, but it was also very hot because it was made of fire. Like it's this weird.
Firehouse, bro.
But it's like it was made of crystal. So there's two houses. The first one, he's like I've this great house, and it was made of fire and crystal, and he's like, and it was very hot and also very cold.
He may have had a fever at the time. It's hard to say.
Yeah. And then he sees another house, which was even bigger, also made of fire and crystal. But that one was just very hot.
Yeah, it's a TARDIS. It's a house inside of a house.
Yeah.
So Enoch goes up and he sees this sort of cosmic temple up in heaven. And he enters it and he sees the throne of God, and angels are trying to approach him. And nobody can look at God because he's too bright. It's like staring at the sun, except worse. And so God calls Enoch forward and says, you can come and talk to me. It's okay. I'm not going to incinerate you or anything. And God says, look, I've heard the Watchers, and I know you're here to represent them, like a public defender. Better call Saul, except spiritual edition. And God says, go back to the Watchers and tell them this. You're the intermediary. And I love that God, in this instance, just dunks on the Watchers, because he's like, I created the Watchers to intercede with me for humans. You sent a human to intercede for you with me. Like, that's
cringe.
That's kind of that's kind of funny. And so basically, God tells Enoch, like, okay, first of all, cringe. Second of all, like, you guys were immortal spirits. You were living in heaven. You would have lived forever in this order that I created for you. You sacrificed all of that to come down to humankind. And so basically, you're going to suffer the consequences of living like humans. You're going to die, and your descendants are going to die too. And I think that's very important, and we'll talk about this later. But what the Watchers did is they exchanged one form of immortality for another. They had a form of immortality. They were these eternal spiritual beings living in heaven. And humans have a sort of quasi-immortality by having descendants. The ancients really saw that as, that's why it's so important to have kids in the ancient world and in a lot of cultures today, is because part of you kind of lives on through that. And there's this idea of this sort of transfer of immortality. And so the Watchers were unsatisfied with their form of immortality. They wanted the human form of quasi-immortality. And they didn't realize necessarily that involves, well, to have that form of immortality, you also have to die, and your descendants are going to die too. And so God basically says, it's like in Psalm 82, it's kind of like, look, you were basically gods, but you're going to die like humans now. And so request denied.
Yeah.
They don't get probation. They're in jail forever, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of sucks. And again, this is because like the Watchers betrayed that order that God established, and they were supposed to maintain that, and they didn't. So their mistake introduced all this chaos in the world, all this violence, and now they kind of have to pay the price for breaking that order. So the request of the Watchers is denied. And it's also said that, and we should have brought this up earlier too, because while Raphael is dealing with Azazel, while Michael is dealing with Semyaza and the other Watchers, a third angel, Uriel, is sent to talk to a man named Noah and to tell him, hey, build a boat because God has a plan to take out the giants, and it's the flood. So in the Enoch literature, the flood was basically the Watchers' evil had spread to all of humankind, and the giants were such a big problem. That's what causes God to say, okay, the earth is so full of violence, so full of evil, I'm going to flood the whole thing out and start again. And so in this Watcher narrative, Noah is the only survivor. So the flood is going to take out all the Watchers' descendants. So not only do they not have their immortality anymore, not only are they trapped under the earth, but also their descendants, which was their form of immortality that they wanted, are going to get wiped out because they can't be allowed to survive among humankind, basically. So that's fun.
Yeah. And then is it after that when is it after the God says request denied that Enoch is basically taken on a tour of heavenly geography?
Basically, he never actually goes back to tell the Watchers this. We kind of assume that they learn this, but the rest of the book of Enoch, which is like half of the book, is just like Let me tell you about
describing.
all this cool stuff that you can't see.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and it's
you want
this.
to talk about that?
Yeah, because it's kind of a trip because it's he's taken then to like it just explains heavenly geography. He's like,
Yeah.
all right, there's like 7 mountains. There's some on the he's like there's some on the east. There's 3 on the east, 3 on the south, I think. I can't remember the order. I know there's east. Like it wasn't west. I don't think it was west.
Hmm.
And then there's like one in the middle, in between, and it's like that one's the tallest mountain, and it's like a throne of God. And then one, and then I think it's funny actually. He talks to almost all of the 4 watchers, who because Enoch's just like, bro, what's this? And one's like, and they say, why do you want to know this?
Oh, the archangels. Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah,
they're
all the
like, what are
archangels like, why do
you?
you want to know this? And then they just tell him.
Yeah. Like,
Well,
I
sometimes
just,
they don't actually fully answer his question, which is
hmm.
interesting. Um, and then so he kind of goes like, "What are these mountains?" Like, "Oh, this is like where all this is like the storehouse for where like all the water. Where'd this water come from? Oh, it's all there."
Yeah, it's important to note that, again, this was a book written by ancient people with an ancient understanding of how, I don't want to say science, the natural world works. And so,
Yeah,
in their imagination, there's like this place where all the hail is stored and all the lightning is stored and all the rain is stored and they kind of get dispersed upon the earth as appropriate.
yeah,
And I feel like with that, there's two opposite ways you can go. One of them is to say that's so stupid, how could anybody think that? And not realize like the ancients were A, trying their best, and B, they were more interested in the meaning of those things than they were with the actual geography of those things. Like, what's the function of lightning? What's the function of hail?
yeah,
It doesn't really matter where they come from. They're talking about, what it can be used for, what it does in the world around them. But also at the same time, for anybody who wants to say that the Book of Enoch contains these magic, esoteric secrets about the world, the people who wrote it literally thought there was a giant box in the sky that all the hail comes from. Hate to break it to you, but I don't think the secrets you're looking for are going to be found in this book. I just wanted to comment on
yeah.
that. So
Are you saying there's not a box in heaven that's just like, yep, this is where my stuff is.
I,
Behold, my stuff.
I, I can't say there's not. I don't think that's how hail works. But it is cool too. Like during this whole tour, it's easy to kind of get lost in the weeds because a lot of it is just like, what's that mountain? Oh, it's this. What's that river? Oh, it's this. What's that tree? Oh, it's this.
Yeah.
Two really cool things in that whole tour is one, there's a place where all the dead people go, which is kind of
Uh,
cool.
yeah, he
And
kind of
that's,
goes to like the end of the world, kind of.
yeah,
Or like
but
the edge of the heavens. And Enoch's
yeah,
just like, this is terrifying. What's that?
that's where all the dead people are. But the cool thing in that is that there's like he hears this sobbing and this crying, and he asks, "What is that?" And the angels say, "That's the soul of Abel crying out for justice to God because his brother Cain murdered him." So the
Yeah,
story of Cain and Abel, a brother killing a brother, what happened to Abel? And in the Bible it says that Abel's blood is crying out for justice. And
yeah,
so here it's like you come to this at the end of the world, physically the edge of the earth. There's this box with all the dead people in it, and this sobbing, this crying, rising up to heaven. And it says that God hears it, and He's like, "I'm working on it." And that it's the soul of Abel crying out for justice. Like that was just a masterclass scene. Like, oh my gosh, imagine like a movie with that in it. But the other cool thing that I thought was really cool was the burning mountain. That they say like this is where God is going to have His throne when He comes down from heaven to judge humankind.
yeah,
Not only is that cool, it also draws on the Sinai sort of picture, like the mountain on
yeah,
fire when Moses goes up to meet God at the top of it. It's kind of like this point of contact between heaven and earth, a mountain on fire. Like you thought a burning bush was cool. Imagine a burning mountain.
yeah. And it's so interesting because I think what this does is that it really sheds a light into kind of a development in ultimately Jewish theology where it says like, oh, God, like heaven and earth are going to there is like it's going to meet. I don't
There's
think
gonna
it
be a
goes full
collision,
on. Hmm?
like a collision almost.
Yeah, it's not quite like I don't think it quite does the same thing as like what you see in Revelation
Yeah,
or even in the latter half of Isaiah. Um, for the people who like Second Isaiah, it'd be Second Isaiah.
Or try to Isaiah, Tommy.
Stop it. But so it's not quite a new heavens and new earth, but it is a heaven and earth are meeting, which is also that's why high places in kind of the ancient world
Hmm.
were thought like high places were thought to be kind of meeting points of heaven and earth. So that's not necessarily new, but I think there's something very interesting about it's like this is where God's going to come down.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily a super unique thing in the ancient world,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it's cool one way or
it's
another.
yeah, and especially also what's also interesting too. I was thinking about this was there's no anthropomorphic descriptions of God. Or maybe I missed it, but in the Book of the Watchers, they didn't really describe God
Yeah. There's a throne, and it says there's something on the throne, but I don't think it ever describes, like Ezekiel does, like limbs or a face or anything
or
like
even
that.
Daniel 7. They didn't describe an Ancient of Days on the throne.
Which again is a dream, but still, like, oh, I suppose this is too. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of moving further away from
Yeah,
anthropomorphism.
and yet
There's still a throne, but
and it still says that God's going to come down. So I think that's interesting.
yeah, that's a whole topic for itself, which I really want to talk about, kind of the
Oh yeah.
depictions of God in ancient Jewish literature. But yeah, no, and like you said, it's kind of neat, like the whole high places being meeting points of heaven and earth. Like that's pretty common to find in the ancient world, like mountains being like, because again, most of the ancients and the Israelites thought this way too, and they shouldn't bother Christians, and we could probably make a whole video about that. But like the ancients mostly thought that there's like a physical place beyond the sphere of where the stars are that we could describe as heaven, and that's where the divine beings live. So sort of in modern terms, beyond the universe. But for them, it's kind of like you have the end of there's this sphere kind of. This is an oversimplification. There's like 1,000 different ways that different cultures talked about this, but a sphere containing the stars going around, and on top of that, that's kind of where the divine beings live. And so there was this idea, and then they're down here, below that point, and there's more stuff below them. This idea that like geographically, physically going upwards does get you closer to where the gods or the spirits or God lives. And so that's why like mountains were places where divine presences could manifest. In Mesopotamia, they built ziggurats, like the big stairways to heaven, like the one in the Tower of Babel story. Those weren't attempts for humans to go up. They were building staircases so that gods could come down.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing. Not what the pyramids were for. Those were tombs. We have to have a pyramid.
Yeah. Well, that was aliens, obviously.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, Tommy. Those were clearly...
It's for the aliens to come down.
Just because white people didn't build it doesn't mean it was aliens. Come on.
I love that meme so much.
It's true. It's like no one thinks Stonehenge was built by aliens because it's a couple of rocks. Like, I'm not impressed by Stonehenge, but...
Well, because obviously Stonehenge was it was the Merlin the wizard.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Oh yeah, there's also giants in the Arthurian myths. In case you were curious.
We're not doing that. We're not going that far because I haven't read King Arthur since I was like 12, and it was probably a really modernized version of it. I don't even recall the giants, but we'll get there. You Anglican swine.
Yeah. So I think this then brings us to the end of Enoch, which
the Book of Watchers.
Yeah, my bad. The end of the Book of Watchers. Yeah, and how it ends. So he's done seeing he's seen like literally just chaos. He's seen where the dead are. He sees where all of the where all the unrighteous, all the wicked people and the wicked watchers go. So he sees all of that, and then he sees where all the hail and the snow and the rain. He sees where all the good stuff is stored, and where the holes, or the translation I read says portals, but like the doors and
the gateways for like the stars,
people,
things of that nature.
Sees all of that, and then he ends. Let's read it because I think it's an interesting way to end. And as often as I saw, I blessed always the Lord of glory, and I continue to bless the Lord of glory, who wrought great and glorious wonders to show the greatness of his works to the angels and to the spirits and to men, that they might praise his work and all his creation, that they might see the work of his might and praise. and praise the great work of his hands and bless him forever. So we
I
see.
know
So
there weren't women listed there, Tommy. Did he not want to reveal his works to women as well? You said men.
dang, Brenner just canceled me. Live cancellation.
Yep. I'm going to have to host this alone now. Tommy's going to either ascend to heaven or, based on that comment, go down to hell with the Watchers, and then it's just going to
Dang,
be me. That's going to be terrible.
dang. No,
We'll
he's just
have to
gonna.
consult then.
I'm gonna be cast right into the chaos. It's even worse.
Yeah, no, that is terrible. But it is an interesting way to end it, like you said, because there's no return to the Watchers. It seems kind of disconnected from the Watcher story. It's just kind of this tour of heaven. That's why some scholars think that part was like added later. But what are your thoughts on the conclusion there? Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think if we remember, I mean, oh, it's also if we remember of apocalyptic being in response to crisis.
Mhm.
And what's actually, I think, even the Watcher's story itself, it talks about a crisis moment.
Kind of a big deal.
And so it's like, here's this crisis moment, and then the response to crisis, especially to those who are oppressed and who are saying, God, I'm trying to be faithful to you, but oh my gosh, there's all this chaos going on. What's going on? What's the point? The response is kind of like the kind of theophany response. I think of Job as well, but it's like, I know what I'm doing. The wicked will be punished, and then I think going back to the Watchers, it's kind of like, hey, there's all sorts of craziness going on, and God's just like, no, the Watchers who decided to, take the women, the daughters of man, whatever, they rejected what I gave them. So this is their punishment. So they're, and there's a great flood that's happening. Justice is going to happen. And it's like, if you don't think that, it's almost like, if you don't think that, it's like, look at all of this. This is like, I made all of this. And there's places where, it's kind of, I think it's almost like a Job-esque response to, where it's like,
That's a good point. Like it's almost just like Job 38, where it's kind of like, look, despite the chaos going on in the world, I made everything. I'm in charge. God is in charge. God made everything, and He's going to see this through. And like you said, and I think that you're tapping on an important point, because in the book of Watchers, God says, I'm going to punish the Watchers and their children, the giants, with the flood, and then we're going to wipe everything out. And what's cool is that later Enoch literature picks this up by saying there's going to be a future judgment, not of water, but of fire. And it's kind of like, for people living in the in-between, they can look back at the flood that judged the wicked and spared the righteous, Noah was spared, and look forward to this future judgment, not of water, but of fire, that's going to do the same thing. So it kind of chops history up into three periods. You've got the pre-flood period, followed by the flood. You've got the intermediary period where we live, and there's going to be the judgment of fire, and then only the righteous live on after that. So it's kind of like, things are bad now, but there's going to be a corrective measure of universal scope, and then things are going to be good again.
Yeah, and so the response that Enoch has is like, God made all of this so that all creation can give Him glory and praise and be like, look, He made this.
Yeah.
And so I think that calls even the original audience for the Book of the Watchers. It not only explains the flood and whatnot, but I think it can also speak to them in their present moment, being like, oh, God's still in control, and He made everything, so we should continue to give Him praise. Dang, is this the start of the Book of the Watchers as theophany? I'm curious if anyone's written on that. I'm gonna have to look that up later.
Just because it's not canonical doesn't mean it isn't interesting, and it can't have some interesting things to say. I think we should be careful about drawing too much on it for our personal lives, but we're going to talk more about how Christians should approach this, I think, in the second episode of this. But I would say, if there's anyone out there who just loves the Book of Enoch and wants to make it part of their Bible, I'd say join the Ethiopian Orthodox Church because you don't want to just tack something onto the Bible without guardrails. Those guys have been interpreting that for like 1,700 years. They have ways of negotiating these ideas because, trust me, it gets more difficult to negotiate the later parts of First Enoch with Christianity the further you go. But, if anybody out there just really wants to do it, like become Ethiopian Orthodox. Man, I've never met an Ethiopian Orthodox guy that wasn't cool. Like I've met like 3 people like that, and they're always awesome. So
Nice.
I really like their church. Sirens. I want like 2 things I want to go through real quick, and then we can wrap it up. How does that sound?
Okay. Yep.
Cool. So I alluded to this earlier. I want to talk a little bit about composition history, and I don't want to get too crazy because we're already pretty deep. Like First Enoch, chopped into 6 pieces, all written different times. But the Book of Watchers, probably it wasn't a deal where someone sat down and wrote the whole thing front to back. Because what's interesting is like the Watcher story, the core Watcher story, which by the way is 5 chapters out of 104. So anyone who just thinks of the Watchers and they think of the Book of Enoch, like you're picking 1 episode out of that, and I don't blame you for it. But the Watcher story was probably originally 2 separate Watcher stories, the Azazel story and the Semyaza story. And that's one of the reasons I alluded to those names earlier. Because if you notice, there's a whole through line of just like Semyaza is the main figure, his sin is the main figure, and that's like the big problem. And there's another through line, like Azazel is the main figure, Azazil's sin is what's causing all of this, and the 2 of them don't seem to be aware of each other. So it looks like there were 2 stories that the author has sort of woven together, kind of like in the Pentateuch. And what's cool about these is that these are 2 different explanations of the origin of evil. Like, where did all this evil come from? One explanation is Azazel bringing, basically teaching humankind violence, teaching them how to wage war with each other. And the other side was Semyaza, corrupting humankind through, well, 1, giants, but 2, teaching magic to humankind. So there's these 2 strains of this. And what's interesting about those 2 strains of the story is that each one of them has different thoughts on how humankind works with this. Because in the Azazel story, Azazel teaches human beings how to wage war with each other, but he doesn't make them wage war. Human beings choose to do that. He just gave them the tools for the job.
Yeah.
In the Semyaza story, humankind is the victim. They didn't want to have angels come down. They didn't want these giants infecting. They didn't want to be victims of magic, and there's still some of that, like humans can choose to practice that or not. But it's kind of interesting. In the Azazel story, humankind is still to blame, whereas in the Semyaza story, it's almost like humankind is the victim of these angelic aggressors, almost. And so I think that's really interesting. It's also interesting that the name Semyaza is kind of weird. Did you notice that, Tommy?
It is weird.
Well, what is different about Semyaza from most other angel names?
This one in particular isn't I forget the proper name, but it doesn't end in L.
It does not end in L. So most angel names, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel.
What's the
And the reason for that is because usually, like, L is at this point a generic term for God. It has a longer history than that. We'll talk about that sometime. But, the name Michael is who is like God. The name Gabriel is God is my strong one. The name Uriel is God is my light. Like, these angel names are just sort of praises to God. And then we have the name Semyaza, which in Aramaic was originally Shemichaza. Semyaza is a little bit more smoothed out for people. But Shemichaza, and the origins of the name are obscure. There wasn't like a dictionary back then that just told us this, but scholars have tried to put it back together. And
Theophoric. Sorry, that's the type of name.
Yeah.
Most of the angel names are theophoric, meaning it has L at the end.
Yeah, like the name of a deity in it.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Any name that has a deity as part of it is considered theophoric.
Like Demetrius is the masculine form of Demeter. It's like there's a lot of names like that, and like all angel names, to my knowledge, are theophoric. They have that L at the end of them. But Shemichaza doesn't, and so there's 2 major models of what that name means. One of them is my name sees, where Shem, name, Shemi, my name, Chaza or Chazon, which is see or vision. So the name is sometimes a euphemism for God, and so it's saying that my God sees. A more probable one is Shemayim Chaza, and that Shemi Chaza is a contraction of that, which means heaven is watching, basically. And that kind of gives some irony to the watch. First of all, it's an appropriate name for the captain of the Watchers, and heaven is watching. But it's also after Samyaza's sin, it's like heaven, like God's realm, is watching. Like they see what's going on here, and so there's some irony in Samyaza not escaping justice that way. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, originally two different stories woven together with different foci and different loci, and that's neat. So I'm sorry. Again, please leave it in the comments if you like that sort of thing. I think it's fascinating, but you guys might not. If people like composition history, redaction history, boy, I've got a lot of fun stuff for you. But if you're not into that, tell me to shut up and I will. So, well, what do you think, Tommy? Should we wrap her up here?
Yeah, I think that's a good little primer for the Book of the Watchers. Yeah, so guess we'll land the ship. Land the
Cool.
ship. Yeah, plane.
We were talking about angels and storehouses of hail. I think landing a ship is the least weird thing we've talked about. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks everyone so much for paying attention. We swear we're working on a name. By the time you see this, we have a name for it. But thanks so much for tuning in. If you'd like to tip your exegetes, we'll have links for that down below as well. Yeah, Tommy, you want to take us out?
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in to the show. If you have any suggestions, for other things you want us to talk about, leave a comment. Like and subscribe, smash that like button. All the all the stuff the cool kids say about
like,
that.
comment, and subscribe.
Yeah.
And
ring the bell or click the bell icon for notifications.
I feel like it's necessary for us to say too, don't fight in the comments. Like we know this is talking about religion, and no one in history has ever argued about religion before. But like, be respectful of each other if we're going to have comments.
Be civil, y'all.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll be back with episode 2 at some point. We have some other stuff in the works here that hopefully is going to be entertaining to you. But we really appreciate your time. Like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it. And we'll see you all in the next one.
All right. Later.